Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Energy News Beat Daily Stand-Up. My name's Stuart Turley, President and CEO of the Sandstone Group. Michael's still out at that family office, just having way too much fun. We got us an action-packed show today. The first story coming out of the blocks, buckle up. Job one for Doug Burgum at the Interior Department. This story's from David Blackmon. Love David Blackmon. I recommend you follow him. He is on Energy. He's on Energy Absurdity at Energy Absurdity on Twitter. You got to follow him. Oil wobbles on crude inventory draw. Large fuel builds. Let's go to the next one. China's November gas imports drop. India seeking to expand Russian energy imports. This is from the Moscow's envoy there. You got to love that. GM shuts down its Misbegotten Robotaxi money pit after acquiring Cruise in 2016 and then blowing $10 billion. What's a few billion between friends, as Michael Tanner always says? Hey, let's go to the first story here. This one was in the Daily Caller. Job one for Doug Burgum at the Interior. And I've said, you've heard me say this before. Doug Burgum, I want to visit with you on the podcast. We also have Chris Wright, who's been on the podcast. His podcast went nuts with Doomberg and also Lee Zeldin. The three amigos, I guarantee you, who's going to fight to be Chevy Chase out of the three amigos, because they are going to be rock stars, and all three are critical in reducing the energy in the United States. This is from David. Anticipating a potential Trump win over the first Joe Biden and then Kamala Harris in the presidential race, officials and bureaucrats have spent the last 12 months pushing out as many new regulations as they can concoct and simultaneously working to make the repeal or revision of existing regulations hard to accomplish. The term Trump proofing has gone viral across Washington as a result. This is absolutely despicable. One of the most important challenges Burgum must quickly act to resolve is the 4-year-long de facto suspension of the oil and gas leasing program on federal lands and waters held in various means. And outgoing Superior Deb Haaland, she is not doing us any favors. You also have all of the oil and gas being held up in Alaska and everything else, while drillers in the Permian Basin and other major plays have been able to keep increasing overall production to steady progression of all-time heights via sophisticated drilling and fracking techniques, and existing plays will eventually peak and move to a gradual decline. We need trillions of dollars of investment just to meet our normal decline curves. We're seeing a drawdown in global inventory, and I think that we have not seen peak demand yet. I think that oil and gas is a great investment. It's going to be here for a while. And that goes back to the Turley's Law. I think, and again, this goes back to the previous administration, the more money that has been spent on renewable energy, the more fossil fuels will be used. Turley's Law, you heard it here second. Oil wobbles on crude inventory draw. Large fuel builds. Crude oil prices fluctuated after the Energy Information Administration reported an estimated inventory decline of 1.4 million barrels for the week. In fuels, however, the EIA estimated sizable builds. Crude oil inventory compared with a draw of 5.1 million barrels for the previous week that pushed prices higher for a while, but the gains were erased by the now chronic perception weak global demand growth is there. Gasoline inventories added 5.1 million barrels in the first week of December, with production averages around 10 million barrels. Let's see here. Prices, while trending higher earlier today, were optimistic about Chinese stimulus and the expectations that the U.S. Fed will announce new rate hike next week. That later decision is now uncertain, with the latest inflation figures for November showed that prices had added 2.7% on last year, which is above the Fed target of 2. Did I tell you I'm looking forward to President Trump getting back into office? Holy smokes, it can't come soon enough. As I said yesterday's podcast, President Biden, if you're listening to this podcast, you're not welcome. I don't want to interview you. President Trump, love to interview you. China's November gas imports drop. Gas imports rose. Natural gas imports during the last month reached 10.9 million tons, down from the 1.4 compared to 10.95 million tons in November, the data from the General Administration of Customs show. China paid about 5.3 billion for gas imports in November. China reported a jump in its LNG imports in October. The country received 6.55 million tons in October, up 28% year on year. China needs all of the natural gas that it can get, and it's in negotiations with Russia for more natural gas, and it's going to buy everything that it can. I don't see anything changing, and then you're going to see the stimulus package that China has going on right now. It is going to be using more fossil fuels as well, too. So not only are they putting out coal, they're putting out fossil, they're still going to be buying everything, because what happens is if they don't get the natural gas and they don't get the oil, people get grumpy. When people get grumpy, they get to where they want to topple governments. So governments kind of like to keep their people at least in enough energy to keep them happy. Let's go to India. India seeking to expand Russian energy imports. This is from the Moscow's envoy speaking on this. New Delhi is interested in boosting long-term supplies in Russian coal and LNG. Moscow's ambassador to India, Denis Alipov. Excuse me, Dennis. I hope I didn't mispronounce your name. There's mutual interest in increasing coking coal and LNG shipments. We are interested in long-term arrangements that should ensure stability and predictability and affordable supplies. You know, I'll tell you, this is an amazing thing. Russia had become the largest oil supplier to India, accounting for up to 40% of the Asian country's overall crude imports. That's a lot of oil. India, the fifth largest economy and the third largest importer and consumer of oil, ramped up crude purchases after Russia rerouted supplies to Asia in response to Western sanctions on the Ukraine conflict. More power to them. I hope that India buys all the Russia oil and natural gas that they can. I think it's phenomenal. And why is that? That is so they can get the lowest cost kilowatt per hour in electricity to everyone in India. They all have the right to be able to afford it. Take advantage of it. And if we go back and take a look, President Trump needs to not worry about the sanctions on the Russian oil and gas, but work with them and put in longer term contracts, work with them, and just not pay any attention to natural gas pipelines coming out of Russia. You would have a lot more money than rather than having the CIA going out and toppling governments and those kind of things. If we worked with Russia and said, hey, you guys go sell there, we'll go sell here, we get everybody lower power, life is good. Let's go to this last story here. GM shuts down its, I don't want to mispronounce this one, Misbegotten Robotaxi money pit after acquiring Cruise in 2016 and then blowing $10 billion. I have said this before. Tesla and Elon will be a survivor in the EV space. And I guarantee you, Elon's knocking it out of the park. His automation is there. This is another reason why GM, Ford, and all the others need to get out. Here's my message to GM and Ford. Work on a hybrid model. There is a need for the flyover states I would buy a hybrid as a second car. Right now, I'm going to be buying a Ford 250. I've got too much land work to do. I need to haul stuff. A Cybertruck just doesn't have the range that I need. I would love to have a Cybertruck. That's going to be probably my fourth or fifth car that I buy to use just because I want a Cybertruck. General Motors announced Tuesday afternoon after blowing $10 billion on its Robotaxi startup no longer fund Cruise, bring ownership out of the 97 to 97 via agreements and shareholders, acquire the remaining shares, and shut down the robo-taxi operation. Fold Cruise's technical team into its own autonomous assisted driving effort for personal vehicles, which includes the hands-off, eyes-on driving feature now available on 24 GM models. Elon got him again. He's out developing it and doing great. Last month, under the fist of GM, then Cruise admitted the allegations of the DOJ, accepted the criminal charges brought against it by the DOJ, and settled. Holy smokes. Cruise halted operations after the permit in San Francisco was operating in Phoenix, Dallas, Houston, and Miami. In November of 23, it issued a recall to its 950 robo-taxis and laid off a portion of its 4,000 employees, among other house cleaning items GM did at Cruise at that time. I'm sorry, I get tickled at this. This is all about, no. Anyway, how do you waste $10 billion and be responsible to your shareholders? Oil and gas executives have heard the ESG mandate of investors over the last 5, 6 years. They are giving back their money very hugely. I mean, when you sit back and also take a look at Exxon to increase oil production by 18% in 2030. So we've got oil and gas executives are giving their money back to their shareholders. They have heard this loud and clear. And you take a look, it's unveiled in ExxonMobil has unveiled to increase spending by 28 to 33% billion annually. That's amazing. When you sit back and take a look, they are going to keep on going doing what they're doing. Now, if you're a friend of the show and you've listened to this podcast, Michael and I have talked about this on the past, and that is the difference between the U.S. operators, exploration and production units. They went ahead and they went through and they stayed the course. Occidental in the exploration space, Occidental did a combination of carbon capture, looking after getting the government money and looking at going that way. That was a fairly good one, but when the money runs out, Occidental is going to be in a little bit of a financial pickle when the money for the subsidies on carbon capture don't come in. So you take a look at Exxon, Chevron, and all of the 50% of the oil in the United States is made from private companies. Those companies are giving money back as a good lion's share of it to the investors and stakeholders. So, with that, like, subscribe, read this to your pets, share it with your friends and family. And we sure appreciate all of the great subscribers. And you can check out the podcast on our Substack, which is theenergynewsbeat.substack.com. And then we also have Energy Newsbeat. Take a look at the top menu. Fill out the survey on there on where you think oil and gas is going. And if you've got a tax issue and you need some tax deductions by the end of the year, fill out a note and we'll send you over with the folks over there at Pecos Operating. They do a phenomenal job on my investment that I've personally put over there. I'm getting 32% on mailbox money. Love me some mailbox money, and I had a 98% tax deduction off of my investment. So, with that, look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great day.